Good evening and welcome everybody to our expanded Wellfleet Library meeting room on Zoom. I'm so happy to have you all here. My name is Jennifer Wertgen. I'm the director of the Wellfleet Library. And tonight we are here celebrating Hayden Herrera's magnificent memoir, Upper Bohemia. And it's an exciting night for me because I have now been here enough years that people who have come here to do events are coming back to do second events. And I am seeing that this summer. And that is just absolutely thrilling for me. And I'm so blessed to be welcoming Hayden back to the library for this. Doubly blessed because Penelope Jencks is also joining us, and she will be interviewing Hayden for part of this evening's program. And that is very, very exciting. A little bit about the format tonight. I will be introducing both Hayden and Penelope. And then Hayden will be showing a brief slideshow and she will do a reading out of her book. And then Penelope will be interviewing Hayden. And then at the end, there will be time for a Q&A so that the rest of you can be involved. Hayden Herrera is an art historian, critic, and biographer. Her doctoral dissertation about the Mexican artist Frida Kahlo became her first book, Frida, a biography of Frida Kahlo. Her other biographies include Pulitzer Prize nominee Arshil Gorky, His Life and Work, and Listening to Stone, The Art and Life of Isamu Noguchi, which was the event that happened a few summers ago when I first got here, and that won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. To pursue her research for her Gorky biography, Hayden was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship. A Japan Foundation grant made it possible for her to travel to Japan to interview people about Noguchi. Hayden has contributed articles and reviews to such publications as Art in America, Art Forum, and the New York Times. She has lectured widely, taught art history at the School of Visual Arts and at New York University, and curated several exhibitions, among them a Frida Kahlo exhibition that toured the US museums in 1978 and a traveling Frida Kahlo centennial exhibition that opened at the Walker Art Center in 2008. She lives and works in New York City and North Truro, Cape Cod. Penelope Jencks is a sculptor who lives and works for half the year on Boundbrook Island in Wellfleet and the other half in Newton, Massachusetts. She has made many public sculptures, most notably Eleanor Roosevelt on Riverside Drive, Robert Frost at Amherst College, Samuel Eliot Morrison on Commonwealth Avenue in Boston, as well as Aaron Copland and Leonard Bernstein, both at Tanglewood. Her private works have been shown in various museums and galleries. I want to welcome both Hayden and Penelope to our space. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I thought I would just start by saying, in 1949, when I was 13, I met Hayden for the first time. She was a cute little, or not so little, chubby 8-year-old running after her big sister calling, "Wait for me, wait for me." A pesky little sister who wanted to hang out with the big kids. Then she grew into this beautiful, charming, and successful woman. How did this happen when nobody was looking? That is part of what this memoir is about. So Hayden, how did you decide to write a memoir?
I decided that I was in my 70s and I realized that I didn't want to write more biographies because they the last one on Noguchi took about 8 years, and I thought, oh, I might not live long enough to write another full-length biography. So also, I wanted to do a different kind of writing, one that was based not on facts and research and archives and interviewing everybody, sorting out information. I wanted to write in a much more free way. Also, I guess the most important impetus for writing a memoir was that I wanted my children and grandchildren to know what my upbringing was, because I believed that my upbringing affected theirs, not only who they are, but who they will keep becoming. So that was the beginning. I thought I was writing just for my children and grandchildren. But then I decided, well, I like some of these stories, and these pages of yellow pages, of lawyers' pad pages with scribbles on them were piling up. And I thought, maybe this would be really nice if it was published. So I was very happy to find a publisher, because I thought the stories might be helpful for all kinds of people. So that's the reason. So I could now read a page and a half from the preface just to let you know a little bit about the milieu, and at least my take on that milieu of that Penny and I both lived in the 40s and 50s and maybe even into the 60s. Okay, this is the beginning of the preface. Our mother was a terrible mother, wasn't she? My sister and I share a rueful laugh. A part of each of us wants to say, no, she was wonderful. After a pause to search through memory, one of us nods. Yes, she was a terrible mother. But our terrible mother gave Blair and me a wonderful life. And she was not the only terrible mother. Penny Jencks had a pretty terrible mother too. Anyway, most of our friends had terrible mothers. When we talked with our friends about childhood, we compare about whose mother was the worst. This is in fact consoling. Our mother's terribleness becomes sort of a joke. It's really not fair. Our fathers are off the hook. For all his charm and wit, Blair's and mine was an absent father. As one of his wives observed, your father never lost a night's sleep over anybody. In addition to their numerous love affairs, my father and mother were each married 5 times. They believed in the importance of pleasure, of living life to the hilt. To follow their own desire was a moral imperative. Repression, sacrifice, and compromise were cowardly. What our parents desired was not always in the best interests of their children. If they fell in love and had to pursue a new lover, they did not hesitate to stash their children with some friend, relative, or boarding school. Children were secondary to leading a passionate life. What I want to understand is, how could our mother have behaved the way she did? And what made the parents of our friends be so impervious to their children's needs? Why did our father think it was acceptable to live in another country and to turn up now and again with a different wife? And why, if they ignored us, were Blair and I so captivated by our parents? Our mother called her friends upper Bohemians. Most were artists or writers or architects living in Manhattan or the Outer Cape. And most were born between 1908, that was the year both my parents were born, and 1920. These so-called upper Bohemians had privileged childhoods, but they rebelled against their parents' way of life. They rejected convention and insisted on personal liberty. Their lives were full of adventure and drama mixed with chaos. The flush of excitement that came with a new love affair made a marriage worn down by progeny seem dull. The sense of security and continuity of duty fulfilled that might have come from sticking with a spouse for the sake of the children was not enough to hold them back from the thrill of the unknown. So that's just the beginning of the preface. Gives you a little bit of an idea of how I felt about the parents in Cape Cod. So I will now, I might need some help, Jennifer, to get,
Fine.
I just share screen? No,
That's correct.
share screen. And, oh,
Click
then,
it.
okay,
Click it pretty deliberately. Yep.
okay,
And now find your PowerPoint.
okay. Oh, there it is. Okay.
And now go to the top where it says slideshow.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And play from start. You got it.
Okay. Are the pictures cut off by the photographs on the right? I think, are they? I mean, the people, the photographs on the right?
You're all set.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to go through a few pictures to give you the cast of characters of the people in my memoir. This is my mother and father, 1935 in the Caribbean. I guess more or less, they were not married yet. They were very much in love, and they each had to divorce somebody in order to marry each other. And the second, this is my mother at that same time. I just point out that my mother and father were, a lot of people didn't wear clothes, especially on the beach, but even in the ponds and back in the 30s and 40s. And so this is, my mother was very happy with her own beauty and called herself a great beauty. And she was happy with her body. Oh, this is another photograph of my mother, probably around 1939, I'd guess, or maybe 40. This is my father in 1949 in Lobster Lake in Maine. And here he is much later, probably around 1970. This is the beginning. This is my father and mother in what we call the big house in Cape Cod on Horseleech Pond, one end of Horseleech Pond. And Blair looking, my sister Blair looking curiously at me. And here she's looking really curiously. Blair was a central part of my life. In fact, the memoir is almost as much about her as it is about me. It's true, I kept saying, wait for me all the time during my life, and I worshiped Blair. And I think sometimes I was probably a tiresome little sister. Here we are, we have, I guess when I was about 2.5, my mother left my father and she took us to New York and actually dumped us with sort of a woman called Ellie. For a while, and then took us to live with her new husband, who was an alcoholic. And there we are in a sort of proper formal photograph taken probably early in 1943, I would say. Now there I am at 5. I think I realized that I must have been a rather cheerful human being because I smile a lot. Now, this is Blair. Okay, that's me in 1945, and this is Blair in 1945. Our stepfather was abusive, and Blair actually had quite a lot of troubles in that period, and she began to look quite sad, and here she looks really sad. This is 1946 in Central Park. Same time, 1946, both of us in Central Park. Our father came, visited us, took us out to the park, and these are the photographs that he took. In 1948, our mother went off to Mexico to get a divorce from that alcoholic husband, and she put Blair and me on a train to a boarding school in Vermont. I guess I wasn't 8 yet. And I don't think I was terribly happy. I didn't think, looked a little like an orphan there. Then in 1950, she turned up in Cape Cod with the Coche de Mama, a big Chrysler. And she said, get in, we're going to Mexico, basically. Here we are in Mexico in 1950. Life was an adventure with her. This is Blair, 1950 in Mexico. There's Penny Jencks, who was very much part of our life. Penny, how old are you? Oh, Penny?
How old am I?
How old are you there?
85. Oh,
What? 13? I think you're
I was 13.
okay.
13. 13.
Another horse.
That's the year I met you.
Yeah.
That's when I first met you.
Oh yeah. Well, you'll have to tell about that later. Okay, there's Penny later,
Well, we'll see.
and in one of my
Yes.
father's, outside of one of my father's captain's houses. Oh, okay. So I'm going to read one paragraph. It's called View from the Porch. And that's Horseleach Pond. This is the pond, and Blair and my mother were probably the most important things in people I think of it as a person almost, this pond. I'm deeply in love with the pond. So it's called View from the Porch because our porch is literally 3 feet, maybe 4 feet back from those reeds that you see there. And here's the paragraph. The wind picks up. I sit at our porch table and watch waves of light pass through lily pads and pickerel weeds as they move towards the pond's shore. One after another, the ripples touch the water's edge and sink into the deep. Like memories not set down. Imagining the pond's depth, alive with swaying lily pads, I can follow the strands, and this is me photographed by Joel Marowitz, taken in 1981. This is me thinking about a swim and putting on a beret and thinking about water. Yes, okay. I can follow the strands of time back to the beginning, thinking about the lily pad stems under the water. The pond water is the fluid of my birth. Every time I walk into it, I am born. If I stare at it, everything that has happened, or most of it, will rise to the surface. And then just one more picture of the pond, just to see that it is a blessed place. That's Horseleach Pond. So that's the end of the pictures, which means that Penny, I think.
Yes. So I was wondering, could you talk about why did you change from writing biographies of artists to writing about your own life?
Well,
as I said, you already do.
I did say that I was sort of exhausted from writing biographies and wanted to write in a much more free way. And also the fact of really, when you in your 70s, you just want to collect up your life, to gather it up and make something out of it. To sort of, oh, what happened? Well, I guess it's okay. Anyway,
I did that.
You did that. Okay.
The
Anyway,
pictures are
pull it all together and make something. And in this case, it was making a book. And but the writing of biographies actually had quite a large effect on my writing of a memoir. First of all, both are chronological, and I have not very good at structure in writing. So the fact of chronology was incredibly comforting to me. The other thing about this is really about distance. When you're writing a biography, you're really writing not about yourself, even though your feelings are certainly in the biography, but you're writing about the person, the artist, in my case, that you're interested in. That means that you have to have a certain reserve. And in writing a memoir, that reserve wasn't such a good idea, I don't think. Also, I think I was brought up, it's sort of cultural. I was brought up not to talk about yourself, which I'm doing now, it's hard. And also if you wrote letters, to really avoid using the word I. So the first draft of the memoir was a little bit too distanced, and over writing various drafts, a friend actually, Mary Gordon, said, you have to say how you feel. And I thought it was good enough just to tell the reader what happened, and they should figure out for themselves how I felt. But anyway, no, I went back and sort of submerged myself in memory and tried to remember, in how I had felt. And it was hard to do, but I think it improved the book.
And so how did you find those memories?
That is both with biography and in the memoir. The process of writing a biography is extremely, of an artist, is very visual. I always had photographs of reproductions on my desk, and I consulted them all the time. And because the energy to write something really came from looking at the art. In a memoir, it's the same sort of visual process, but there's no reproductions to look at. It's like memories come as a sort of flash, crossing an image, crossing your mind just very quickly. For example, I might see my mother at her easel, or my father fiddling with his tools where he makes drinks. Like, I didn't know what those tools were at the time, but anyway, there's a lot of little implements that were on his bar. Or my sister in the water, Blair in the water, or something as material as my bedroom curtain, which when the sun was behind it, became incredible blazing red, and it had little flowers. So the whole thing seemed to sort of come alive. Anyway, you start with those flashes and then you sort of amplify them by, it's almost like sort of sinking into water. I feel like you're sinking deep down, and then they get bigger and they turn into a story, and then they turn into a book. So that's how it's a very visual process, which maybe it isn't that way for everybody.
And so how did you create your particular voice in Upper Bohemian?
Well, it's partly just sinking down into memory. I wanted the voice in Upper Bohemia to start with a sort of 2.5 or 3-year-old. It's almost pre-verbal at that point. It's just sort of, I remember certain things, and obviously a child couldn't have quite written them the way I wrote them, but I wanted to do it from inside the child's head. And what I'm hoping is that the voice gets older, and eventually the book ends when I'm 12. So I think it gets a little more sophisticated and complicated. But I do remember how I thought as a very, very young child. So what it was like to think. In fact, discovering at probably age 4 that other people think was a real shock. I was walking down the hall in New York behind Blair, and I suddenly realized that I wasn't the only one that had thoughts whirling around in my head, that she did too, and so did my mother. So this was kind of a relief, because that meant I wasn't crazy. So that's.
I couldn't understand what you said. Could you say it again?
Oh,
I lost it.
Oh, did anyone else lose
Walking behind Blair?
I was walking behind Blair and suddenly realized that other human beings had thoughts going around in their head as I did. And before that, I had thought maybe I was the only one, because you're really young and you don't know what other people have got in their heads. But then I figured out that she was thinking too. Anyway.
So then your vantage point or perspective as the memoir's narrator?
I think I sort of covered that in the terms of the distance and trying to put more.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think I've covered that.
Okay. So how much of the story is based on fact and how much of it is invention?
It's a mixture. They really go imagination and memory, factual memory, for me went hand in hand, and actually imagination sort of amplifies memory. I mean, you use imagination to sink down into those memories and get them back and hold on to them. I certainly didn't remember what the exact words that my mother or Blair said or you said. Like, there's some words from you in this book. But I know all of those characters very well, and I think you just have to be honest and imagine what they would have said. Plus, for my mother stays inside of me, and she's still there. So in a way, when she says something, I'm saying it too. If you see what I mean. I mean, it comes out. I know what she's going to say. I know her rather well.
Too well.
Too well.
Um, so, so this might be a good point for me to tell you what I remember of your life as a little child, aside from being a pesky little sister. My first memory of meeting the Phillips family was in your big house. And I was taken there by my parents for supper. We were all having supper together. I guess Charlie must have been a baby, my brother, and you were definitely a baby. And I was there supposed to play with Blair, and neither of us were very interested in playing, but we were pretty interested in eating. So we sat around the table, and then there was this incredibly strong smell. And your mother got sort of upset about it and said, "Oh, Jack, the skunk is back," or something like that. I don't remember what she said exactly, but suddenly the whole house was sort of, I mean, we were on a porch. You had a porch on your big house?
No, but we had a sort of area outside with a great big semicircular bench. Do you remember that? And there were a few bricks in the ground out there too.
Well, we were sort of, it seemed to me that it was, I have the feeling that it was sort of airy where it was, but I can't remember exactly. But anyway, I remember your father, who was incredibly handsome and strong and dramatic looking, and he got up and he said he was going to take care of it. And so he went off. And that was the end. And I don't remember anymore. But then I remember other things about, you know, that, I mean, you were like one and a half maybe at that time. And then later in around 1949, that's when I really remember you. I don't remember you as being 1.5. I only remember you as being 8 and very cute and always feeling as if you were kind of being left behind. And so anyway, it was a funny period of time, and our parents were kind of crazy. And my parents used to go and visit your parents without me and leave us at home. And when I was about 7, my mother decided that I was old enough to babysit my little brother, who was 4. And so they would go off to visit you or you know, the Wilsons or whoever they went to see. And my mother said to me, "Now don't be scared. Flippy can take care of you." Flippy was our French poodle. And that was the attitude of parents around in those days. They just felt that it was okay. When you're 7 years old, you're sort of a really grown person. You know what you're doing. You're not stupid. And your dog can easily take care of you. Sort of like Peter Pan, you know, that kind of a dog. Anyway,
Penny, because do you remember that in the memoir, Blair was put at, I think, age 3 into a kind of turkey wire playpen with a dog. And the dog dug its way out and made a nice little way for Blair to get out of that pen. And she walked all the way about 2 miles to the Matsons because she wanted to see Peter Matson. Anyway, she wasn't lost, she said, at all. She knew exactly where she was going. Yeah. So these parents didn't, they gave us an enormous amount of independence. They did not entertain us. They didn't give us lessons in anything, well, I can remember. They didn't drive us places, except Dwight McDonald drove us to the movies about once a week. And that was like the most fun thing in the whole world. There's a place right near the house that goes sort of up the hill right behind to the right of the house. We'd sit there and then we'd all get into, I think it was a black car, and he'd take us to the movies. Totally marvelous. Some parents paid attention and others, but they just sort of thought,
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, my parents were not, my parents were born a year before the people that you say were upper Bohemians were born. So my parents were sort of, they didn't quite fit into the Bohemian notch, although they did a little bit. Certainly in terms of walking around with no clothes on and all that sort of thing, going swimming with nothing. But my mother was very, she really thought it was important for us children to go and visit other people's children. So she would take us to the beach and she would make plans with other mothers to meet on the beach, and she would be there. And the other mothers weren't there, but she sort of would look after everybody. So she was a very, she sort of took being mother seriously, unlike some other mothers.
Well, yes, I don't think my mother took it very seriously, although she did in later years, she did. I mean, maybe when I was a teenager, she started to pay attention. But I had to spend.
Oh, then my mother didn't pay any attention at all. My mother totally gave up on us when we were teenagers. But so anyway, now to get back to the point, are you going to continue this memoir now that you've gotten to the age of what, 10 or 11 or 12, I forget?
12.
Are you going to go on to your
written? I've written
12
a memoir, which
are you going to go on further?
Yes, I did one from 12 to 21. It goes from the end of this memoir ends with my mother putting me on a train to go to boarding school in Lake Placid.
Oh yeah.
And then it ends when I'm married at 20 and then get pregnant. I'm pregnant at 21. And basically a lot of it is about being a teenager, a miserable teenager, going to Putney and getting depressed, the usual thing that teenagers do. But our English teacher asked us to write journals in the spring of our junior year, and my journal was really scary because it was mostly about being miserable and people doing, throwing up, being bulimic, and friend was cutting her wrists all the time. Anyway, it's kind of gruesome. And it's full of, at the moment, it has too many quotes from the journal, because I feel that that's raw material and it's real and it's true, but it's a little bit awkward in writing. It's too much interruption of the flow, I think. Anyway, yeah. So I have written one, but it needs work. Yeah.
I have a bad connection.
Oh, I hear you. Do you not hear me?
So then the other thing is, so are you working on that now, or are you working on some other thing by now?
I put that aside for a bit, although God knows it needs work. And I was quarantined in Vieques, an island off Puerto Rico, during the major part of the pandemic, although it seems to be major again. And I thought, well, I'm going to be here for a long time. So I spent 3 months writing a novel. And the novel, it was something I've always wanted to do. For some reason, I think writing a novel is much more important than writing biographies. That's a prejudice, I know. But anyway, it was something I've always been scared of doing because I really don't know how. But I did it. And it was sort of liberating to not have to deal with facts, although a huge amount of it is about my wicked mother. She gets less wicked, though, as the novel goes on. And it's sort of a mixture. If memoir is a little bit of fiction is quite a lot of memoir, at least in my case, it is. So, do we want to turn over to questions from the audience?
Yes, and I just want to say, if you don't want to ask a question or raise your hand or be on camera, feel free to put your question in the chat and I can relay that to Hayden or even Penelope. Mary, right? You have a question? You have to unmute yourself, Mary. I can't hear you.
Where are the questions?
Yep,
There we go.
There you go.
I was sorry, I was muted. I was wondering who else was in that group of Upper Bohemians. I've taken an art class with a kind of a history of the Long Point Gallery and a couple of other galleries with Grace Hopkins.
Mhm.
And I wondered if your family was part of that group
Not really.
of Upper.
I mean, we lived in Provincetown several different times in my childhood. And my mother knew all the fishermen. She was a great friend of Herman Tasha and Kaki Captiva, who went off with the wife of one of the Upper Bohemians in Truro. Or maybe it was actually Wellfleet, right, Penny? Anyway, but the other cast of characters, there were the Jencks.
Yeah, I think so.
And there were architects. I mean, there was Marcel Breuer. There were painters. I'm trying to think who. Well, Mata rented a house from my father in 1942 and Mata, Peggy Guggenheim, and Max Ernst all rented a house for the summer. And there were the Edmund Wilson and Mary McCarthy early in the 30s. And who else, Penny? Who else was there? Oh, Serge Chermayeff was a major character, the architect Serge Chermayeff. Who else? Can you think of anyone else? Edwin Dickinson was sort of a friend.
Oh, yeah, Dickinson.
What? He was.
Dickinson it's right. Dickinson was, well, yeah. I'm not sure of the circle that your parents frequented is, they don't always overlap with each other, if you know what I mean.
No, they don't. They don't. And there are others.
Although mostly they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think if you think of the beach picnics that took place during that period of time, there were always, I mean, Norman Mailer but he's too young, right?
Yeah.
To be an
well,
Upper
I don't remember
Bohemian.
him in childhood. I remember him later. But then there was Dwight McDonald and Nancy McDonald, and then Gloria. And, you know, there were a lot of people. They were not, and Connie Breuer's wife, Connie, was a friend. Who else? It's hard to remember them all, especially if one was a child, paying more attention to kids than grown-ups.
Yeah.
Anna Matson was a lot.
Oh, of course. God, thank you, Nick. Of course. Anna Matson and Norman Matson were a big part of my life. Anna's actually my godmother, because I decided I needed to get christened when I was 12. And so I wanted to have better mothers. So I chose Magooch, who was my father's wife, and Anna Matson. That was a pretty good combination. Yeah, that was good.
And then also there were the Walkers.
Oh, the Walkers.
Remember Chuck Walker and Danny Walker?
Yes.
Their parents, and they were always sort of appearing on the scene.
Right, and the Chavjavadzis. Well, they were Russian, sort of royalty emigres. They were wonderful. I don't remember them that well. I just remember how they looked. I don't remember how they talked. She was wonderful looking. Yeah. Any other?
Oh, yeah.
Are there more questions?
I have a comment. Can I make a comment?
Of course.
I'm just looking at it as a writer, Hayden, and knowing that you've always written biographies, and I'm halfway through. I'm not through. I'm at the place where you're walking through the dark woods to get home on Black Pond Road. But I'm really fascinated, and I want to give you big kudos for the voice, which is you capture both the child from the adult's point of view, which is a difficult thing to ride, and especially the specifics of her imagining details and her private thoughts and how she entertains herself with visual things and with her own private games, and also the way you set the book up, which you just read, but setting up what you want to explore in the book is such an enticement. So these are like fictional characteristics in a way that also belong to memoir. So I'm excited for you about writing a novel.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's very kind. Very nice. And I'm glad you're reading it. Any more questions?
Yeah, I want to ask Hayden, if you survived a wicked mother, did you, I don't know if you became a mother and if you wanted to do things differently.
Oh God, yes. Yes, that's all in the second memoir. I got pregnant pretty young. I mean, I had Margot, my first child was born when I was 21. And I was totally determined to do everything differently from my mother. My mother was not, I tried, I mean, I think I was more affectionate, but my mother was not. She was not somebody who even liked to hold hands. Yep.
And then it's Paul. Can I call you back?
What?
Okay, bye.
Anyway, I wanted them to have a secure home, and I did end up getting divorced from my husband after 23 years, but pretty much Margot and John were grown up. Yeah. Or he was just finished college and Margot was finished with college and had a job. So yeah, it's never a good thing to do, but anyway, I think they had a pretty secure home, and that was what I wanted them to have.
Yeah.
Continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Elspeth.
Yes. First of all, very, very moving. I just wanted to hug that little girl and be so, I was just absolutely shocked, especially at times when you were, had to find you were sort of looking in it, got separated from your mom and a stranger took you home. I mean, I just absolutely couldn't believe that kind of being so casual, not to mention the second time when you were stuck in Texas without the next ticket. I mean, I just wanted to put my arms around you. And I wondered if you ever had any chance of getting together with those people. Just disappeared, I expect, or you would have, you didn't ever, there was no way who they were just.
Oh, you mean the people that helped me get all the way from Texas to New York? No, which people?
The woman who took you home when you knew your ad very little as a 3-year-old.
Yeah, she took me to my aunt's apartment, and actually she had to buy a ticket because in Mexico they had taken both of my tickets, and so I had no ticket to get from Texas to New York. So I thought it was the end of the world, of course, and it did seem like the end of the world. But I just sat around and wept, and finally someone had to deal with it.
Hello?
Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about Magooch, who was the widow of Gorky and your stepmother at one point?
Oh, I loved her. She was beautiful, much younger than my mother, very graceful. She wasn't as narcissistic as my mother. My mother really thought, I mean, she said, I'm a great beauty, you know, that's what she said. Magooch was very literary. She read a lot. Well, so did my mother read a lot. She was fun, in a way, more amusing than my mother wasn't that amusing, but she was very, very smart and very articulate, but she wasn't funny, and Magooch was sometimes. She ended up moving to England. I mean, she married my father. She met him in 1948, about a month after Gorky hanged himself. And then they fell in love and they went off to Europe to live in 1948 and around Christmas time. And it was sort of an on and off thing for a while. But anyway, they then lived in France until about 1952 when he came back and lived in Boston. What I loved was living with Magooch and my father and Gorky's two children, Maro and Natasha, and then my father had two more daughters with Magooch. So we were 6 girls and we all lived in Boston. It was brief, but it was a year and a school year. And that was really fun. I mean, I loved my stepsisters. They briefly called my father Daddy. So, I mean, he didn't adopt them because they wanted to be Gorky's, but he was a father to them. And I must say, I don't think I was jealous. The only thing that made me jealous once was when I didn't get my own, turkey houses. That my father had he raised turkeys during the war, and then he moved all the turkey brooder houses onto the other end of Horseleach Pond, and they became our bedrooms and a bathroom in the back. And when I remember arriving and having my stepsisters in what was my turkey house, but it was fine. All the turkey houses are identical. It was perfectly okay. But there was a moment of jealousy, but not really. It was okay sharing my father. We didn't have much of him anyway. So, any other questions? Oh, I see a hand. Is that Nick? I see a Leon and Nick.
Leon, Gail.
Why? Oh, Leon?
Yes. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
I hear you.
Did your mother ever realize the effect that she had? Did she apologize? Did she at one point look back and say, I'm sorry of the way I treated you?
No, never, never. She never admitted that she'd ever done anything wrong. And actually, Blair and I both confronted her with the fact that one of her husbands had abused us, but she just refused to take it in. She just said, no, it happens to everybody. And didn't, she didn't believe it. I think my mother probably had a certain fragility somewhere, and you don't want to break somebody, like confronting them with the horrible things they've done all their life. And I also wanted, in a way, this memoir was the process of forgiving my mother. It continued in the novel, by the way. I mean, she has been forgiven. I've forgiven my mother. We ended up being very close when she left. She lived in Mexico from 1948 to 1984. And then she moved to Provence. And I think that's where we became very, very close. Although I saw less of her. Maybe that's why we got closer. Oh, yes, Nick. Nick?
I mean, Leon's question leads right into what I was thinking. I was so horrified page after page. I just couldn't believe it. I knew nothing about your childhood at all. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering, do you have any sense, how did you not only survive, but become so successful and so balanced? And you and Blair, I mean, you're both successful, balanced people. What do you attribute that to yourself? Because it seems you went through, I can't believe what you went through.
Well, in adolescence, I think that a lot of it impacted my adolescence, and I was not a happy teenager. And in fact, I really wasn't. I think I got very happy when I got pregnant. I loved having children. Having babies was just wonderful. And also I was married and secure, and I had a nice apartment, and everything was fine. But I think my mother was extremely strong. I mean, even though fragile, I think she was a real life force. You probably remember her pretty well, Nick, no? She was sort of vehement and strong and positive, and everything was going to be wonderful. And we're going to go to Mexico, and it's going to be marvelous. Or we're going to go to France, and that's going to be the best thing you've ever did. She was always made the future sound terrific. And she gave, as I said, she gave us a wonderful life, a lot of adventure, a lot of, I mean, as an adolescent, I had an argument with her about having to change the place where you live all the time and having to change schools. I must have gone to over 10 schools. That's tough. And I remember telling her that I really found it hard because as a teenager, you're trying to invent yourself and you try out all kinds of personae. And it was hard to come to a conclusion of be somebody. I kept moving and having to adapt to new situations. She said, no, it makes you much more interesting. So we had a little conflict over that. But I look at those photographs, I seem to be smiling a lot. I think I liked life. I loved my life. I loved walking. I mean, Penny, you mentioned the long walk on Black Pond Road, or no, Nick mentioned it, I think. It was interesting. I mean, you saw things. It was really fun to look at everything and experience things. And catching turtles was my main occupation as a small child in Cape Cod. And minnows, making little ponds for them and then making a channel so the minnows could go out. I had a good time. I really did have a good time. But I think strength is inherited, maybe. And I think maybe it came from my mother.
Well, can I add to something?
Yes.
One of the things that struck me after the horror Nick mentioned is that, I was thinking to myself, come on, Elspeth, everything's not all bad. She let you play. You were cutting out paper dolls. I mean, you had this pre-television childhood where you were cutting out paper dolls with the little tabs, which I certainly remember. She let you persuade her to buy you the little marionettes, and you went home that evening and made conversations with them. I mean, you were having such an inventive, interesting time from that point of view. I think I just wanted to say that because it was, I have such compassion for you. And
well, I really did enjoy my life. I think one thing is that my mother was a painter, and so my father was also an artist, and all my life I tried to do things to make my mother admire me. I mean, that was a key thing, and I worked hard at it. I drew, and she loved my drawings. She thought I was really good at things. Everything I did, she thought I was really good at it, and I think that was huge in my not collapsing completely and turning into a mental wreck. Yeah, I think that was a lot of it was trying to please my mother and then learning to do stuff that would please her. Even writing later on. I mean, she liked my writing, and that was important. She was very positive about stuff I did. I think she was nicer to me about stuff I did than she was to Blair. But Blair was the beauty. So that was hard on my mother, I think, because my mother wanted to be the only beautiful one. And you know how it is. Are there more questions? Oh, okay. Well,
thank you so much. This is just wonderful. And we are also lucky because Hayden said she would come back next summer when our meeting room will for sure be open again to see us all in in person, even though this extended meeting room does let people join us from other parts of the country. And I always say that that's the silver lining of this whole Zoom situation and this whole pandemic, is that we do get to see our far-flung patrons, and that's always a nice thing. Thank you again, Hayden, for your amazing memoir. I know it's available at the Wellfleet Marketplace for those of you who are here in town, and I could put something in the chat for those of you who are not, so that you can purchase it as well. And thank you so much, Penny, for your contribution here tonight in doing this interview. I know we all learned a lot. I certainly did. This was very exciting. And I hope to see you all soon back here at the Wellfleet Library.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah.
You are very, very welcome.
Great fun. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay. Penny, thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you.
my pleasure.
All the COVID dividend. You get these people from all over the country. This is bright side of COVID dividend.
Yeah, let's hope it isn't worse next year.
Yeah,
I hope
could
so.
be.
I hope not. And you take
Bye.
care. And thank you for this.
Thank you so much. Where do we go now to get away from the screen?
So I'll end it.
Okay.
I'll end it. All right. Have a lovely evening, everybody.